600 hours on a quiet morning in the Western Pacific, U.S. Navy satellites picked up something unusual. Two Chinese aircraft carriers, the Loing and Shandong, weren't just exercising near their own coastline. They were cruising together beyond the so-called Second Island Chain, an invisible line that has defined America's dominance in the Pacific for decades. To enable strategists, that's like crossing the 50-yard line in football and staring straight at the opposing quarterback. This isn't just another training run for Beijing. It's a message written in steel and jet exhaust. We can bring the fight to your backyard. The Loening, China's first carrier, is no stranger to patrols. The Shandong, its first domestically built carrier, has been building up its jobs in regional waters. But operating side by side, this far from home, is a new level of ambition. It signals a deliberate attempt to show Washington that China's Navy no longer plays just defense. They're practicing offense. The symbolism is sharp. The US has relied on its carrier stray groups as floating fortresses, platforms of air power that can dominate any ocean they sail into. For decades, China lacked the ability to seriously contest that presence. Well, not anymore. These twin carriers represent a direct challenge to the idea that the Pacific is America's lake. And here's the kicker. This wasn't a chance encounter. These maneuvers were timed, staged, and publicized. Beijing wanted the world, and especially the Pentagon, to notice because behind these drills lies a bigger ambition: reshaping the balance of power in the Pacific. From late May into early June 2025, China's Navy pushed its limits. For the first time in history, the Loing and the Shandong conducted coordinated large-scale drills beyond the Second Island Chain. By operating there, Beijing was signaling confidence in its ability to sustain carrier operations at long distances, a hallmark of a true blue water navy. The exercise wasn't small. Satellite images revealed dozens of escorts sailing alongside the carriers: Type 055 cruisers, Type 052D destroyers, and supply ships capable of refueling the task force at sea. Overhead, J-15 fighter jets roared off the decks in pairs, practicing air patrols and mock strike missions. Surveillance aircraft orbited on the edges, extending the carrier's situational awareness. Chinese state media described the drills as routine training, but the scale and the location told a different story. The operation had a clear message. China's carriers were no longer coastal showpieces. Instead, they were functioning as tools of power projection, able to operate in the same contested waters where American carrier groups normally patrol. By stepping past the Second Island Chain, they entered a zone traditionally considered America's forward line of defense. Guam, home to a massive U.S. air and naval presence, suddenly found itself within the theoretical reach of Chinese carrier aviation. It wasn't just about planes and ships. The timing of the exercise coincided with rising regional tension. Japanese and Taiwanese officials reported increased Chinese military activity across the region. To naval planners, this was more than a drill. It was a dry run for a future in which Chinese carriers sail in lockstep, deep into contested waters, daring U.S. carriers to respond. The drills weren't just about steaming information. They were about pushing limits, testing how close China could operate to critical choke points without sparking a direct clash. As the Loing and Shandong maneuvered through the Philippine Sea, their escorts fanned out in protective arcs. The Type 055 cruisers, bristling with long-range missiles, acted as shields, while 052D destroyers ran anti-submarine sweeps overhead. J-15 fighters flew combat air patrols and overlapping cycles, creating a rotating umbrella of protection. It looked less like a training exercise and more like a combat rehearsal. The proximity to Japan added another layer of danger. Japanese defense officials reported multiple encounters between their patrol aircraft and Chinese fighters during the drills. In one incident, a Chinese J-15 closed to within 45 m of a Japanese P-3 patrol plane. That's a distance so short that the turbulence from the fighters' engines shook the prop aircraft. Japan lodged a formal protest, calling the maneuver reckless. For Beijing, though, the near miss demonstrated boldness. We will not back down in contested skies. American forces were also nearby. Guam's Anderson Air Force Base surged flights of B-1 bombers during the same period, and U.S. Navy PA Poseidon patrol aircraft were observed tailing the Chinese carrier group. At sea, U.S. submarines likely tracked the Flotilla A from a distance, silently collecting data on Chinese escort tactics and carrier flight operations. Every maneuver, every launch cycle, every radio transmission was logged. Valuable intelligence in case today's training morphs into tomorrow's confrontation. What made the situation more volatile was the environment. The Western Pacific is a crowded theater where militaries operate in close quarters. Radar locks, warning calls, and aggressive maneuvers can escalate in seconds. Both sides know it only takes one mistake, one mid-air collision, one misinterpreted radar track to ignite a crisis. The 2001 EP-3 incident near Hainan, where a Chinese jet collided with a US surveillance plane, looms as a cautionary tale. Back then, only one aircraft went down. Today, with entire carrier strike groups shadowing each other, the stakes are far higher. Adding to the tension, Chinese state media amplified the operation. Footage showed J-15S roaring off ski jump decks, missiles loaded under their wings. Broadcasters highlighted live fire drills against Mach C targets, stressing that the carriers could project power anywhere beyond the first island chain. The message was clear. Beijing wasn't simply training, it was performing for an audience, both domestic and foreign. For Washington, this wasn't just saber-rattling. The drills revealed China's evolving doctrine, operating carriers far from home, coordinating multiple strike groups, and integrating them with destroyers, submarines, and surveillance aircraft. That combination is exactly what makes a carrier group dangerous. And now the Chinese Navy was showing it could do it too. By pushing beyond the second island chain, Beijing has demonstrated an ambition to reshape the Pacific balance of power. To understand why this matters, you need to know the island chain strategy. The first island chain stretches from Japan through Taiwan in the Philippines, forming a natural barrier close to China's coastline. The US and its allies have long relied on this arc to contain Chinese naval movement. The second island chain lies further east, running through Guam in the northern Marianas. This shift isn't only about geography, it's about time and distance. In a fight, a carrier group beyond the second island chain can put Guam within strike range, can threaten US and Japanese sea lanes, and can stretch American response times. The Pacific suddenly looks a little bit smaller when Chinese jets can launch from decks positioned hundreds of miles east of Taiwan. The exercises also showcased a developing Chinese doctrine, mass and coordination. Operating two carriers in sync is no simple feat. It requires precise timing of flight operations, air defense handoffs, and logistics. The plan used to struggle with simple deck cycles. Now it's rehearsing the same playbook that US carrier strike groups perfected during the Cold War. Each flight of J-15S, each refueling operation at sea, each coordinated maneuver was proof that China's Navy is learning at high speed. For Washington, this is a direct challenge to deterrence. US power projection has long rested on the assumption that no rival could match the operational reach of its carriers. If China can field multiple carrier groups supported by long-range missiles and satellites, the cost of US intervention in the Pacific rises dramatically. Suddenly, American carriers operating near Taiwan or the South China Sea face layered threats. Land-based missiles, submarines, and now rival carriers. Allies have taken notice too. Japan scrambled fighters during the drills. Taiwan's defense ministry warned of expansionist intent. Even Australia and the Philippines quietly stepped up monitoring of the Western Pacific lanes. Everyone sees the same thing. The Pacific is no longer uncontested. And here's a strategic twist. Beijing doesn't need to win a naval battle to achieve its goals. It only needs to raise the risks high enough that Washington hesitates. Every new deployment beyond the second island chain chips away at the perception of American dominance. That's how great powers shift balance. Not overnight, but one carefully planned exercise at a time. While the Liaoning and the Shandong were making headlines in the Western Pacific, a third shadow loomed in the background. China's newest carrier, the Fujian. Unlike its older sisters, the ship isn't just an incremental step forward. It's a technological leap that puts China into a new league of naval aviation. The Fujian is China's first CATBAR carrier, short for catapult-assisted takeoff but arrested recovery. Unlike the ski jump ramps on the Liaoning and Shandong, which limit aircraft payloads and fuel loads, CATBAR systems use electromagnetic catapults to hurl planes into the sky. That means heavier strike fighters fully loaded with bombs and missiles, and the ability to launch specialized aircraft, like airborne early warning planes. For Beijing, this isn't just about adding another carrier. It's about unlocking the kind of air power that US carriers have wielded for decades. At over 80,000 tons, the Fujian rivals the size of America's Nimitz-class carriers. Its flight deck is flat and expansive, with 3 electromagnetic catapults, visible in satellite imagery. Reports suggest it can host a new generation of aircraft. The J-35 stealth fighter, designed to compete with the US Navy's F-35C and the KJ-600 early warning plane, a Chinese equivalent of the E-2 Hawkeye. Together, these platforms would dramatically extend the carrier's reach and survivability. The timing of the Fujian's progress is critical. As of mid-2025, the carrier is completing sea trials and is expected to achieve initial operational capability very soon, possibly within months. State media has already shown footage of its catapults launching test aircraft, signaling both to domestic and foreign audiences that China is closing the gap with US Navy faster than many even expected. Strategically, the Fujian is a game-changer for 3 reasons. First, it breaks China's reliance on ski jump carriers, allowing true blue water strike capability. Second, it enables longer-duration air campaigns. Carriers can sustain continuous flight operations with heavier and more diverse aircraft. And third, it strengthens China's ability to fight in layered formations. While Liaoning and Shandong tie down adversaries, Fujian could deliver precision strikes and control the battle space with airborne radar. US analysts are watching closely. In war games, the presence of a CATBAR-equipped Chinese carrier complicates every scenario. American carriers would face not only land-based anti-ship missiles and submarines, but also a carrier rival able to project power at similar ranges. The Pentagon has noted that Fujian's eventual strike wing could make it the most capable carrier outside the US Navy. For Beijing, the symbolism is just as important as the hardware. The Fujian represents national pride, self-reliance, and proof that China's defense industry can master complex technologies once thought out of reach. Every sea trial and every launch is broadcast to millions, reinforcing the idea that China is no longer a regional power, but a global one. The message couldn't be clearer. By sailing the Liaoning and the Shandong past the second island chain and preparing the Fujian to join them, China is signaling that the Pacific no longer belongs to America alone. These deployments weren't accidents. They were carefully staged rehearsals of what future conflicts could look like. The United States still holds the edge. Its carrier strike groups are larger, more experienced, and backed by a global logistics networks that no other navy can match. But China doesn't need to overtake the US overnight. All it has to do is raise the risks, stretch American forces a little bit thinner, and make every future confrontation more uncertain. That